I'm Doug Jones, and you have discovered Beyond Trek Podcast.
A red alert.
I have been waiting for this season of Discovery for a while. Did you guys realize that season 2 ended? It was like 2 years ago. 2 years has gone. Yeah, wow. It's. I think it's like about 2 years, and it seems like it's gone by fast, really fast. Well, but first, let me do some introductions real quick. This is Beyond Trek Podcast. Welcome, everyone. I am Big J here with Dag, our trivia master, and subbing in for Watney, who's taking a little break, is Renzo. So, Renzo, thanks for stepping in and filling that part for us.
Thanks for having me.
So you're going to keep us on track and on schedule and going through this review. And by the way, guys, I love your hats. Those hats are awesome. The Klingon hat, the Niners hat, Dag, that's pretty cool. So
thanks, Jay. You know, I've also been really looking forward to Discovery. When I first heard of that Discovery was in production and they were going to set it in the 2250s, I was really put off by that. Mm-hmm. The show itself has been, in my opinion, it's been fine, but it's been, you know, we've already picked apart the prequel era so much. I would just really like to have something taking place post, you know, TNG. Mm. And while Picard tried to do that, we were disappointed in Picard. Anybody who's listening or watching can go check out our archive, because we did way more on that show than we needed to.
Right.
But the fact that Discovery is now well beyond where any canon could really affect it. I'm really interested in seeing what they do with it. Today's episode was very inspiring in that direction, so I'm hopeful. You know, that coincides with the name of the episode.
Yeah, and I thought, so this is what I'm curious about, and you guys tell me if you've heard anything on this from anyone on Twitter or whatnot, but I wonder if this was always the plan, was to have the show jump 930 some years into the future. To me, it seemed like maybe that was an influence over just the extreme amount of backlash that they were getting with having another prequel show and painting themselves in a corner and having to deal with the canon purists, et cetera, et cetera. There's just, I've got a feeling that was something that changed gears maybe during the late first season or in the second season. They said, you know what, let's have the storyline. We're going to put them into the future and just forget about it. Let's move forward. Have any of you guys heard anything that backs that up?
I'm not sure about when that change happened, but we know that production of Discovery went through many different heads, right? There was the Brian Fuller era, which is where we get the new look for the Klingons. It's where the majority of the Klingon War concepts and storyline came from. That was all pretty much locked in during his tenure.
Right.
Then there was Gretchen J. Berg and Aaron Harberts, and that's where we know that most of the Mirror Universe stuff came out of, because they were very deeply involved in that part of it. And then after that, it's been Alex Kurtzman and Michelle Paradise. So I'd assume that if they made the choice to jump ahead, it was probably made somewhere in that second season, which is where their like assertiveness started to finally like take over on the show. Okay. As far as how I feel about it, I'm actually a little concerned about it, because there's other Gene Roddenberry works that kind of have a very similar vein. One called Andromeda, which essentially has a similar concept where it's a big gap of time. The good guy United Federation equivalent falls apart, and then the captain like wakes up after its collapse and has to try and rebuild it. So it seems a little bit like trying to retread that, and I'm a little concerned, but I'm excited to see more Discovery, because I've enjoyed what I've seen of Discovery second season, or rather I enjoyed Discovery second season entirely. So
Dag, real quick, I think we forgot our spoiler alert. So while you're talking, Dag, while you're giving us kind of your first impression, give us our spoiler alert.
We're going to do the spoiler alert now.
Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, this show is going to break apart everything you need to know about Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 1. So if you haven't watched it yet, you're in for a ride. And if you have seen it, then you'll know everything about what we're talking about. But to Jay's point, I had read certain things while, hanging out on Twitter that the first 2 seasons of Discovery could now sort of be looked at as like a cold open, a very long cold open for introducing the 31st century in Star Trek as a setting and not just a plot device.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do and if there were any gaps or gaffes that were made in the narrative and continuity. I know that there are plenty of detractors who have pointed out everything, but I'm happy to look at it that way. I haven't completed my rewatch of S1, S2 yet, so S3 I'm going in fresh, and this is the first time I'm watching a Discovery show as it airs. So,
Okay.
For those of you that know how like enthusiastic I am about Star Trek, this hit the nerve, and I'm diving in. So
Good.
where do we start?
Well, let's start with the name of the episode, right?
Yep.
That Hope Is You, Part 1. And
Renzo, that's so nice.
I mean, I have hope in all of us. Humanity is our hope. All right. So our first scene is actually really, really, I thought, fascinating. We have a beautiful parrot that starts out in red with 7:59 somehow blinking like an alarm clock on its side. And, a second later, it starts chirping at 8 a.m. and an arm goes and like pokes at it and swats it away. And we get this montage scene of a character whom we don't have a name for at the time, just kind of waking up, going about his basic morning routine, getting his teeth laser cleaned, and then we get more parrots, a blue one, a green one, a yellow one, a red one, and it just keeps going through that same routine.
Day after day.
Exactly. Establishing the monotony, I guess is a way to put it, of this guy's daily routine.
Now, I want to point out that this is the most comfortable bed we've ever seen in Star Trek. From Enterprise, from TOS, TNG, from even Deep Space Nine. When Worf tore apart that bed, it was a foam, little like foam cover that we have today. This bed actually, like the pillow, looks comfortable and pleasing. But then we find out this bed is sort of a holographic construct.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Some kind of holography, or like that pin, those pins, those little pin things you have where you put your hand in it and you just display it forever because you don't want to mess it up.
Mm-hmm.
Those little pin devices. It's very interesting stuff here.
Yeah, it's sort of new technology.
Do you think that's a memory foam mattress, possibly? Or, well, yeah, and this technology kind of reminded me a little bit about the quantum storage that we saw in Picard, where he just took out this little box and things just like grew and appeared. So that's what I thought of when I saw that.
So I think that we're seeing 2 different technologies at play here. Or 3 actually. We see holograms, because the parrot thing was definitely a hologram. We see the reaction when he swats it away. We see that when he rematerializes the box that we later learn contains a flag, that one rematerializes exactly like the ones from Picard season 1, where it kind of like comes out of like a transporter buffer
from the archive.
Exactly. And then the third kind is what his bed was made out of, and the desk that came out of the floor. Right. It's almost like honestly, what it looks like to me is like nanites that just self-assemble into something, like programmable nanites that build a physical thing for you, but it just dismisses itself when it's gone. And
that's a cool thing.
I've taken to calling it programmable matter because that's something that I know is like something that has been used in other sci-fi worlds.
Okay.
So I'm kind of just calling it that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a new thing, and it's really neat.
Okay.
Yeah, and he is searching for something.
Searching for signals. Now, this has to be very, very solitary, very lonely kind of thing, because and what signals are being searched for, and that's, I think, revealed a bit later. But right now, that is what it is. Wake up every morning and sit at a desk and stare.
I have a question.
Okay.
What of details that we learned from things like the Ready Room videos or the after episode videos? Are those kinds of details things that you guys include in these episodes?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Right. Yep.
Did you have one to point out?
Not for this scene, but just for the next one. I just didn't want to. Yeah.
Oh, right on. Yeah, I think this is a really emotional switch from this very calm, routine, ordered open, and then suddenly, boom, action.
And we're in space, and we see a ship running from another ship. The ships that we learn are later this 5-pointed pentalobular ship of Cosmo that is chasing Book's ship, which we learn is called the Nautilus at the end of the episode. And they are both racing through a debris field. There's like large Starfleet-looking ship parts everywhere, and it's just running and gunning, right? We learn that Cosmo is accusing Book, whose name we later learn, we don't know it yet, of having stolen cargo from him, and he's running. The defense that Book says is, it's not yours. You don't deserve to own it or whatever. She's not yours, I think, is the phrase he uses. And
does anybody else recognize Cosmo as the orc number 12 from Return of the King? Anybody?
It does look like meat's back on the menu.
Exactly.
Yes, I thought that too when I saw that guy.
I was trying to figure out what species he might be, and there is one called the Batwing. It doesn't really have a full name in Memory Alpha, but that's what it kind of looked like to me. Renzo?
I think he's a Beetlejuicean. So we see them in the motion picture.
Correct. Yes.
I think the only thing that's weird about him is the Beetlejuiceans or Beetlegoosians in TMP had like a red marking along their face. His doesn't have that, but otherwise he looks dead on like them. I thought for a bit he might have been Uridian, but...
Oh, no, I would have recognized Uridian. I mean, maybe a little bit there, but...
Right, yeah, no, I was getting Uridian off of...
We do get a look at a lot of aliens in this episode, and Discovery does do the revision treatment to many of their aesthetics, except for one, and we'll point it out when we get there.
Okay.
So, delightfully, we then see this large blue spinning time-space anomaly that's popping up out of nowhere, and Book decides to go towards it because he suspects that, Cosmo's not going to follow him towards that, and he's right. Cosmo veers off, he continues past it, and suddenly a red angel, or red bright light, starts flying right at him. He tries to dodge, he fails, they impact, and we see Michael Burnham for the first time. We see her inside of the suit, looking real freaked out and trying to prevent her loss of control, but the ship or the suit systems are simply down. She can't decelerate. She can't do anything until she tells it to full system reboot. Yeah. Which, as anybody who's ever worked in technology can definitely know, that have you tried turning it off and back on again is definitely one of those important troubleshooting steps.
Yes,
it's the answer to every question in Star Trek.
I can't tell you how many times. No, I can tell you for sure. If you hear someone tell you, if you're talking to someone technical and we recommend to you, did you turn it off, turn it on again, or did you reboot it? Please don't take it as a slight or a put down or a challenge to your intelligence. I am telling you, more often than not, surprisingly, that will do it. I have lost an hour of my life here and there at different times thinking, no, I'm not going to have them reboot it or turn off, turn it on. Let's figure out what's going on. And finally, I'd say, you know what, let's just restart this, see what happens. Boom, fixed. I should have done that an hour ago. So yeah. Now, here's the thing that I kind of had a problem with in this scene with Michael Burnham coming through that wormhole and colliding with the ship, was the fact that she came through there coming in hot. And so that suit apparently can withstand that kind of impact, because even if the suit can, isn't there some kind of feedback to it? Let me give you this example, and this might explain what I'm talking about. A tank, the tank, it's U.S. military. You've got a couple guys in the tank. Tank is hit with a cannonball or rocket, whatever. The tank survives it, but the occupants inside do not. Am I wrong on that? Just because there's still that the impact, reverberation, or audio wave or something?
No, you'll get liquefied if you don't have something like an inertial dampener, which I assume that her suit would have one.
Okay.
And when it reboots, they get Star Trek magic, which is the inertial dampener, and save her life that way. One thing I did want to point out about it, though, is that the scene where she's actually making hitting atmosphere is very similar to something we saw in Voyager once with B'Elanna Torres going orbital skydiving,
Yes.
like diving like under like a shield that's essentially saving her, and that's something that comes up a bunch of places in the Star Trek novels. It was supposed to be done by William Shatner in Generations at one point too.
Mhm.
So orbital skydiving, I guess, kind of makes sense. They've got away, but
Finally saw it in Star Trek 2009 when they dove onto the
True.
drill platform on Earth
yep,
or
the
Vulcan.
Well, yeah,
the
over
big
Vulcan.
difference though is that they're supposed to have like parachutes, not just hit the ground. So
Right.
bit
That
different.
was,
but-
a Section 31 oversight for the Red Angel suit. No parachute.
Yeah. So one
Yeah.
neat thing we saw in this episode, as they were like coming clashing towards the ground, both the ship of Book and Michael Burnham, was we saw local animal life. We saw this like cool blue butterfly looking thing get chomped on by this adorable beetle looking thing, and that was fun. We don't normally see like background life in these episodes.
Right. I like that. Yeah, that was a nice touch.
Yeah, and she's freaking out on this.
She spoke really fast and had to get a lot done considering spinning to your
Yeah.
almost certain doom.
Yeah, there was some quick dialogue in this. It was fun. I enjoyed that bit of it too. So surprisingly, gravity does win, and she does hit the ground, and she impacts hard, and she
Oh, yeah.
climbs out of the ground, the crater that she's kind of found herself in, and spits out some water. Has a bit of like a rough time getting out of the suit. She looks like she's hurt. She's limping for sure.
Hmm.
And she starts to like check the suit. She's got like a little pack on the back that's got a phaser, a tricorder, a comm badge, some water purifiers, some food, the basics. It's built into the backpack. And
Just want to point out that I don't think they're comm badges at this time.
oh, that's fair. It is just a yeah.
Because she does have a
Oh, right.
communicator
She has the actual
stashed
communicator, too.
next to the little takeaway box.
Right.
point. Very good
She
point.
was pretty far away from comm badges by the time she left.
Yeah.
I like that she just like cast off the suit and it like goes into the sentry mode, if I can borrow that MCU parlance.
It
Well-
did. It was like the Iron Man's sentry mode.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, it just kind of stands there behind her, and then she starts using it to like scan for life, which is a very big deal because she confirms that there is life, some life, and that was a big deal because it proves that their trajectory through time prevented control from wiping out all life, which was the big fear at the end of last season.
Right.
And she confirms the year, which is a big deal too.
Yeah.
3188.
Indeed.
Now, this was. Did anyone else think when she immediately opened up her helmet on this planet? Did anyone think of the scene in Galaxy Quest when they all landed on that planet and the one guy just went ahead and opened the hatch and guy was like, "What are you doing? We're on an alien planet. Is there air? You don't know." It's like, I mean, at what point did she confirm that opening that helmet would not have? It was just. I thought of that scene immediately because, yeah, she just opened the helmet right up. And
It's a
was
Star
okay.
Trek trope.
Yep.
It is a trope. I'm just gonna guess that the suit would have warned her that it was, not breathable, but life support was also failing. So we're lucky.
True.
Right. Now, this is the part that I didn't get. I didn't catch. What did she do with the suit? Like she was just talking and going so fast. I didn't understand this part.
So there's a causality loop, right? Remember how the reason why they started this whole thing was I want to say it was 8 red signals that appeared throughout the galaxy, right?
Right.
We've only seen 7, so she had to create the 8th one, and that's what she does. She sends the suit on autopilot back through the wormhole and has it self-destruct and do the signal for the 8th one. If she
Right.
doesn't send the 8th one, then there's a problem with causality. So
Right.
she was closing the loop on it.
So
And she's-
so that reassures Spock that they got there safely. The fact that reality didn't immediately unwind when they fell through the portal. I've got some cool funnel ideas about this portal and how.
Oh, okay. So at the end of season 2 Discovery, when it was several months later, and Spock goes onto the bridge and they see that 8th signal, that's what's happening here. She's
Don't
sending
quote
it
me on the
back.
number, but I think it was 8. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it
you're
was
right.
8 too, and
Okay.
it's reassuring Spock that they got there safely.
Okay, gotcha. All right, I get it now.
So she's got that super urgency. The suit's like, oh yeah, the time thing's closing, and she's like, crap.
And then we get this last little quick moment of Michael Burnham repeating her name, her rank, her title, her position, and her serial number.
That was a really interesting scene to me because I'm not sure if like she was trying to remember, if she was having some kind of memory problem, or if she was rehearsing, because we see at the end of the scene where she finally encounters the next closest thing to a Federation representative. And she says exactly what she repeats here.
See, I think it was more like a self-affirmation kind of thing. Like, I am Michael Burnham. I've done this. I am this person. It's like a mantra almost, right? It's like meditative for her.
I almost even thought it might have been a consoling herself for throwing herself out of time 900 years. Like, I like to think about the concept of time travel, but if I was stuck 1,000 years in the future with zero possibility of returning, I would be in shock. That's what I would be in.
No, that's fair.
And not only that, but she's stuck 1,000 years in the future.
Yep.
On a planet where she can't see anybody or see anything. She just sent away the last piece of big tech that she had, her biggest advantage, and all she has is the survival pack, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I would definitely feel a bit of shock with that kind of situation.
Well, remember, we do have a concept in Star Trek of temporal narcosis, right? Like, once time starts getting kind of wonky, your memory starts getting kind of foggy, you start regressing, it's just kind of a mess. So maybe this was something that she thought might help prevent that.
And she has the mental discipline to do something like that. Not, unlike Captain Braxton.
Right.
Good reference.
Okay, so then we get our intro credits, which are only, unless there's something you guys want to add.
Nope.
There were some differences in the credits
There were.
this time around. There were time crystals at the beginning, flying past the little designer outline. There was a cool little droid that showed up.
Looked like Eve from WALL-E, I think.
A little bit, yeah. And there was a new badge type, and then there was like a giant sarlacc that was like trying to eat Discovery, which I thought was
that's still been there. That's the flower opening thing that they've had.
The flower opening thing, looking at Star Trek Picard now. Giant flowers.
Yeah. So I think the other change that they made is there's a scene where like the typical phaser pistol transforms into a new looking one. To me, the new looking phaser, which we haven't seen in the episode, by the way, just looks a lot like the guns from the Orville. It looks exactly like their smooth ones from that show.
And the firearms in this 31st century, I think they were specifically designed to appear more alien because they're not the point and shoot with the handle style. They're more, they've got an emitter that covers the full front of the weapon, or it's a wrist-based circular weapon that activates, and there's a lot more technology that's built into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they seem to come out of nowhere too, again, out of that like programmable matter. It just kind of like assembles itself on your arm, kind of like Tony Stark's suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean, if you're going to keep up with the pop culture technology, you have to be relevant, right?
Yeah.
You're right.
Then we break out into our scene, our third big scene, which is Michael meeting Book by just kind of wandering towards the crash site, which she saw when she was wandering a bit. She's no longer limping as much. She seems to have like steadied on.
There is a thing about the journey that she takes here. We mentioned this in Lower Decks, but Lower Decks had some really awesome space establishing shots. You got to see the pretty ship and the planet. That was really great. Discovery, not so much, but what you do get from Discovery are these really pretty expansive landscapes. And I'm just kind of a landscape junkie.
I like them.
I thought again, another cool way to separate itself from Lower Decks, as you know, they might be running concurrently in the near future, is to have different kinds of establishing shots.
Mm-hmm.
So we get this time we get a really good look at Book's ship, which is called the Nautilus again. It looks kind of like a B-Wing from Star Wars. It looks a lot like a Kushan cloaked fighter from Homeworld. It has this really neat horizontal asymmetrical design. It is cool looking, and as soon as she gets up close to it, it disappears. but it doesn't cloak like anything we've ever seen before. It looks almost like digital camouflage, again from the MCU, right? It looks almost like it screens on the edge of the ship, looking transparent rather than like a field that makes you cloak.
And we got that from Beyond. Jayla had
Yeah.
that digital cloaking camouflage for the Franklin.
Yeah, that's what this looked like to me.
You're right. You're right. What was the name of the thing in the MCU? The twin jet?
The Quinjet, yes.
Quinjet, yeah.
Oh, Quinjet. Yep. I thought of that when I saw how this cloaked.
Yeah, when they engage the whole like reflector so that it looks like clouds on the bottom of the helicarrier and such. Yeah.
I love that screen cap right there, Book. about to lay a smackdown on the back of her head.
Yep. So we get this fun back and forth, a very well choreographed fight scene where Michael shows off that she can spar, and she's got her Susmanha like Vulcan fighting down. She is handling somebody much bigger and stronger than she is, and she's holding her own.
Yep.
And she keeps saying, "I'm not fighting you, you're fighting me," right? Which is an interesting thing.
Well, and he was suspecting she was just going to steal a ship.
Right.
That was the accusation, or steal the cargo. Perhaps is maybe part of it too.
Well, he's like a bounty hunter on the run, so of course he's got very valuable cargo. He's not going to just dump it at the first sign of Imperial.
Right.
Whoops.
But again, let's remember, Michael just fell out of orbit. Like she crashed into this planet and had a little bit of a hike to get here,
right?
But able to keep up with Book, who ended in a ship. So that's very impressive on Michael's part, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we end that fight, this little sparring match, with a neat. He throws a knife at her and it circles back around and he catches it before she's able to draw a gun on him, and they end up both on the ground right at gunpoint or knife point, and they disengage there.
This nice little moment that I like in the dialogue, because I really like when Star Trek puts dialogue on characters that really make you feel like you can relate to that, or they feel like they're actual people. Was when Book said, "All right, I'm going to count to 3," and Michael says, "No, I'm counting," and he says, "Count, damn."
Yeah, the human moments are exemplary in this episode.
Yes, they are.
I actually really liked some of their back and forth as well during this conversation that goes on after this of like, "Who are you? No, I don't want to know. Where are you from? No, I don't actually care where you're from. I don't want to know." Like, it's very aggressively choosing to be ignorant about her so he doesn't get attached or doesn't get any sort of care towards her, because he seems like he's the kind of person who later on we learn is very empathetic. So if he tries to keep her at a distance, he can't start to care for her, which is interesting.
Right.
So we get this neat scene where he starts accusing her of like using a wormhole that isn't a natural one, because the nearest natural one's 100 light years away. And he goes, "You think ripping holes in space is a good idea? Wasn't bad enough for you that the Gorn destroyed 2 light years worth of subspace?"
Can we chew on that for a second?
Absolutely.
Let's do some chewing.
I'm all over the Omega happening for that. Like, for the listeners who may or may not be aware, Omega was a phenomenon we encountered in Star Trek Voyager first, where there are these particles that if you can stabilize them, they can provide an endless energy source, but they're very difficult to stabilize, and they do require a lot of power to get there in the first place. And tampering with these things, the risks are damages to subspace that can undo for light years. And since warp travel depends on subspace, the accident is not worth the risk. And it hasn't been. And captains up to the 2370s were ordered, if you encounter Omega, this supersedes the prime directive, destroy Omega at all costs, because if people screw with it, they can destroy our ability to travel through subspace and
you could strand
and the civilization. Yeah.
Right. You could strand a civilization, completely cut them off, and there is no other order that stands any higher than Omega. Just like Dag said, if you discover an Omega particle on a planet in the middle of a shopping mall of a pre-warp species, forget about it. Get right there.
Yep.
It's gone. And the other part, I like the reference to the nearest natural wormhole is 100 light years away. That's the Bajoran wormhole.
I sure hope
We don't
so.
know that. We don't know that. They could be anywhere, really. They
It's
could have
gotta
mapped
be.
out the whole galaxy worth of
I mean,
wormholes, right?
it could be the Bajorg wormhole. It could be the Barzan wormhole, which is a natural wormhole. It's not stable, but it's a
not
natural
stable.
wormhole. I
Well, but
definitely
he wouldn't
think-
say 100 light years because it's not stable. It could be anywhere. So,
Well, but the beta terminus is stable. It's the delta or gamma terminus that is not.
So the other thing I thought that was really interesting was the
Okay.
fact that Michael Burnham recognizes who the Gorn are. This is 10 years before Kirk encounters the Gorn for the first time in Cestus 3, right?
You
but
say
that wasn't
that,
first contact.
but Lorca has a Gorn skeleton in his office.
Mhm.
True. There was
season
that.
1.
That's true. But Lorca's from Mirror, so who knows what he knew.
Right.
Right. Well, and maybe that's how Burnham got to know who the Gorn were, was her experience in the Mirror Universe, something off screen or mentioned or something like that.
That works.
So
But
you
you're
gotta-
right. It's definitely a weird canon reference for that.
The Gorn screwed around and destroyed 2 light years of subspace.
So just for context sake, in the Omega Directive, the episode of Voyager that talks about this thing, they actually talk about a 23rd century Starfleet research base that exploded, was destroyed, and the 130 Federation leading scientists all died there, and they destabilized multiple light years worth of subspace where you can't go to warp. You can fly through it if you're already at warp, but if you're there, you can't create a new solid, like static warp bubble.
Can't create a
So-
warp field.
Yeah,
Really? Oh, you can go through it if you're at
that one, yes. That one, yes, because it was small. Like it's reasonably contained.
Right. It's small
okay.
enough that after traveling at warp, your warp field would degrade slower and you'd be able to get to the destination. But once you're there and stopped, good luck.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
gotcha.
stranded. It's a calm in a storm kind of thing.
And I kind of look at the Omega particle as like the 24th century mutually assured destruction weapon, because like it would be one of the cruelest things. Imagine if they had, detonated an Omega device between Cardassia and Bajor just to end the Dominion War quickly. You've basically cut off Cardassia from the rest of the galaxy. It's a genocidal weapon.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not something you mess around with. So whatever happened that caused this, the Gorn were definitely risking things by playing around with it.
Yeah.
So
And they lost 2 light years of space somewhere. But that's not all.
oh no. So then we get this interesting scene where Book starts to admonish like Michael Burnham for like being a crazy rocket girl flying out of wormholes, and Michael Burnham doesn't disagree with him except to say, "Do not call me Rocket Girl," and she is real forceful and sassy about it. It
Yes, she
great.
was. That was good.
So this whole scene, I think, was like tour de force acting from Sonequa Martin Green. I think she showed off on this scene. There's that like "please help me" moment where she's like verge of tears, and she's like bringing you to the verge of tears because she is serious. She tells him how she is all alone, her ship is gone, and she manages to get him to listen.
Yeah. And here we are on the Nautilus.
So now they're on the ship, and we see a whole lot more of that programmable matter.
I think it's an iStore. It looks like an old iStore, like an Apple store. This is where you would have gotten to get an iPhone before they built those into starships, right?
It does. It does.
It's very clean.
It's very TARDIS to me, like
Yeah.
the older TARDISes.
It's very clean. It still has that expansive, display window that I feel like we were introduced to a little bit in the JJ movies, but very much so in Discovery, where the view screen takes up like a whole third of the front of the bridge.
So
right.
this
It's
is
actual
probably the most
physical window.
important. Yeah, it's not it's not a view screen, it's not a hologram, it's a window.
Right.
I think that this is probably the most interesting or most important scene of dialogue in the whole episode. It's this whole conversation about how, well, I need a dilithium recrystallizer, mine cracked like a lychee nut, I can't get Benamite crystals because nobody can get those for quantum slipstream, tachyon solar cells are too slow, and don't get me started on trilithium, right? And then they go
I picked up on that too. Like those are 4 of the biggest propulsion references, and QSD is ubiquitous now apparently.
Yep, they use it in a couple scenes down the line. And then we get introduced to Grudge the cat, who is fascinating. A giant, like Norwegian forest cat with a thyroid condition.
Because she's heavy and all mine.
That's
that's a grudge.
That was a big old
Yeah.
chonker of a cat.
Oh yeah, Maine
Beautiful.
Coon.
Yeah, Maine Coon or Norwegian forest cat. It had the tufted ears, so I wasn't totally sure.
Did why am I blanking on his name? Did Book say that it was a different species of something?
Just a cat.
Oh, okay. I need to put the subtitles on a rewatch because my ears like, no. He said it wasn't a cat. I'm like, what is it? A flurkin?
And here's where the dialogue gets real deep. It's the Federation is gone realization from their conversations where she starts to like ask what happened to it. And the first reaction from Book is, beats me. Been gone a long time.
Yeah.
Like it's no big deal.
Yeah, it's something that just happened. It happened like weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he mentions that it was a long time ago after the burn. Ooh.
Yeah. And she doesn't know what that is either because she's out of time.
Right. The burn, very ominous. And that's the thing I wanted to learn more about. But unfortunately, the fall of the Federation happened, the book said, about 120 years before he was born. So to him, it's like, well, it was no big deal. It was before I was born. So
I got the impression that it was 120 years prior to the current time.
Yes.
That's what I got. And yeah.
I'm sorry, prior to the current time, not before he was born.
It happened before he was born, but it was still 120 years prior to the current time. So the current time, I don't think we established this, is 3188.
Mm-hmm.
It is 930 years after the last episode of Discovery. And that puts the sort of fade away of the Federation between 3068 and 3088.
Yep.
So the direct line that we get from Book about what the burn was is the burn was the day the galaxy took a hard left. Dilithium, one day, most of it just went boom. A lot of people died. And then Michael reacts with dilithium is the heart of every warp-capable ship. And they very clearly talk about how it wrecks interstellar travel, commerce, everything. Though as a point of questioning, we know that there are races that didn't use dilithium in their warp systems because the Romulans didn't.
Correct.
So a Romulan quantum singularity drive wouldn't care because they don't, as far as we know, they don't use dilithium. But it's certainly a big deal, right? And
well,
it explains.
You're right, and you're right, Renzo. That was the first thing I thought of was, well, there's the Romulans, but then after I thought that, I said, well, but we're talking now in the burn happened in the 31st century. That's a lot of time where the Romulans could have just been like, you know what? Dilithium is the way to go.
Yeah, that's fair. No, I'm not saying it's an inconsistency. It's just like there might have been other ways. So
given what we've seen here about how like sensors are limited due to, communications being down, and there's all kinds of things we don't know about the other powers in the galaxy. There very well could be a flourishing Romulan and Klingon empire who are just laughing that the Andorians and the Vulcans and this whole federated territory is just ruined. And we still don't know, like the dilithium thing, was that intentional? Is that a natural occurrence? If you don't use it up fast enough, it just detonates itself? Some kind of maybe isotope breakdown?
I really need to know more about this. Yeah, that they were sitting on a time bomb for that long.
Well, we know that there are whole planets that had like a crust layer of dilithium, right? Like Halkans, I think, or from TOS, the ones that caused the mirror universe.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that episode? Their entire planet was gigantically rich with dilithium. So you expect that their entire planet just went boom.
And there was another planet in TAS that had these massive dilithium mountains that could be just totally exploited.
Right. So one thing I did want to point out though is just as like from somebody who likes the whole franchise, right? I'm really happy that the collapse of the Federation wasn't because of some sort of like decadence or rot from within. They weren't too spoiled or too pampered or too holier than thou. This was some sort of like external existential crisis that was serious, because I don't want the collapse of the Federation to be chalked up to like, oh, they got stale. Because that's lazy. That happens in far too much sci-fi, and it just doesn't. It's not interesting to me.
That isn't to say there wasn't decadence within the Federation.
Sure.
We have seen like bars and stuff in the JJ verse where people are just totally cool with drinking and partying it up.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like that idea as well, Renzo. That's a good point.
I like the mystery. There's a mystery behind the collapse of the Federation, and it is, why the hell did dilithium just suddenly detonate? And that part right there, that is I really want to know that.
I hope that's the mystery of the season. I hope that's what we spend the season trying to figure out.
I wouldn't mind that. Yeah.
And you could, what's really interesting about that is, we can play this out. Dilithium explodes. The Federation suddenly has a institutional crisis with the inability to move their ships in through space. The ships break down. Then after the ships break down, there are no ships that can go and maintain all the communication beacons. So you can only really maintain what you can get to. So that causes a breakdown in communication. And depending on how fast that breakdown happens, you've got planets seceding, you've got coalitions being created within the Federation, you've got planets being totally cut off because they were maybe on the fringes of the Federation.
Right.
So there's a lot of panic that's happening once this happens. And that can totally lead to a fadeaway if the right minds aren't in the right place to be able to solve it quickly, come up with an alternative or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just glad that they chose what they did, that they didn't go through the lazy, the Federation got stale, they didn't see this internal threat rising from within, and they just collapsed. No, this makes it distinct from Andromeda to me, and that's a good thing. So that was one of my fears. In Andromeda... Go ahead.
No, you brought up Andromeda, so please.
Yeah, no, so in Andromeda, that show, the way that the Systems Commonwealth, as it was called, which spread across 3 galaxies, collapsed was they ignored the rights of one of their members. These members were like genetically modified humans, think Khan, super soldiers like Khan, and they spent a century building up a force and then decapitation strike their own government away. They ended the Systems Commonwealth, caused a civil war, collapsed the galaxy, and conquered half of it, right? So that's what caused it in Andromeda, right?
Sounds a lot like Asimov's Foundation series.
It is a lot like Asimov's Foundation, which is why I'm glad that this isn't, right? I want this to be distinct, so... Yeah.
Well, and the only question that I have for the producers is, has no one seen Star Trek 4? Come on, nuclear reactor, high energy photons, recrystallized dilithium, go home.
They had one. He talks about it. Remember, he talks about his dilithium recrystallizer, his cracked like a lychee. So they have them.
Yep.
Well, no, but he said he can't recrystallize his dilithium
because his dilithium recrystallizer cracked like a lychee.
Right. His tool to do it broke.
I just heard that his dilithium cracked and he can't recrystallize it. But if they have a recrystallizer, that's fine. All right, cool. They have
love it, right?
Thanks.
Yeah. So there was one last line in this scene that I thought was really, really good. That it was like Burnham's like coming to terms with it, where she goes, "The Federation is more than just warp drives; it's vision," and that's a beautiful sentiment, and I really liked it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really great. More beautiful scenery as they hike to Mercantile
to get more dilithium to get off the planet.
Yeah, they walk through these falls, which are very beautiful. There's a very mossy, rocky area that just it strikes a really good contrast in the colors, especially because all the clothes they're wearing are these dingy browns and blacks and grays. And
during the march, we get a discussion between Book and Michael about what they're going to trade for it. And Michael offers up like a tricorder, her old vintage tricorder, which is worth something to collectors, it seems, in this setting. But he tries to convince her to take off her badge, her Starfleet badge, because that's a sign of like a true believer, and that'll get them into trouble.
Yeah, because there are new power structures coming into play, and if you are adhering to the dead Federation's way, you're in the way of those power structures.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. One thing I wanted to point out was that the names seemed, oddly simple. You've got Book, Grudge. He's calling someplace Mercantile. I think he named the city Requiem. So these are just like the new way words are being used. I don't know. The language just seems something like I would expect from a post-apocalypse or a dystopian ending.
Well, you brought up the name of the actual town that they're going to, Requiem, right? Which might have some meaning, but the word Requiem is particularly in a Roman Catholic sense means it's a mass or a song used in the mass for the repose of dead souls or the souls of the dead, right? It's a lament. It's a sad thing that you chant or you utilize to like send the dead away, right? So it's kind of like an ominous sounding name for a place.
And I'm definitely ready to get into the The Requiem scenes, that was a lot of good eye candy.
You mean Babylon 5?
Oh, yes, that looks so much like Babylon 5.
Just defies gravity beautifully.
Yeah, it looks so much like Babylon 5, but the external structure of it reminded me of the Borg cube texture from Picard.
Yes.
Yeah. And for half a second, I was like, are we at Copelia Station? Have they just harvested that Borg cube and turned it? What's going on here? But we're not. I was trying to read in that big expansive scene the names of places, because if you remember at Picard, we saw a cityscape and there's like Cassidy Yates Freight Lines and Quarks and Mr. Munt's Barbershop. And here, all of the language appears to be Orion to me. There are some Klingon gifs, but most of it looks like it's Orion.
Oh, okay. That is...
It's a beautiful shot.
Yeah, that's a very high catwalk. And
it has guardrails.
There are guardrails.
The future has seemed to learn the lesson. Put guardrails on your bridges, people.
But do they have seatbelts yet?
Probably not.
We had seatbelts in the 2370s. Picard got one at the end of Nemesis, but that might have been a deleted scene. So
that was a deleted scene. So.
And here we get some aliens. They show up to this security checkpoint.
We get 3 very stiff and very serious Andorian guards who don't want to let Michael through because she's not a courier of this organization. They scan her and confirm that. And Book uses the fact that she's carrying this ancient merchandise as a rationale for letting her in. And they're like, I don't care. You're not getting... And then the bosses chime in and say, let her on through.
Yep.
And so the guard lets off this quippy, I wouldn't if it was up to me. And Michael responds even quippier. It's not. Take a few steps in, and then Book again turns to Michael and go like, hey, lady, listen, this is going to go bad if you have to have the last word, right? Like, he's clearly afraid that she's going to get them both killed.
Right.
Well, he's already in a tense enough situation, and anything she says or does can give away his cover of whatever other business he's trying to do here. Because I think for him, he's sort of in the lion's den. He stole a cargo from another one of the employees of this place, or the consultants or contractors for this place, because he's clearly one of them. And if they find out he stole the cargo, he's just as dead as the guy who lost the cargo.
Right.
Yes.
One thing about the Andorians still worth noticing is that we've had very different looks for Andorians over the years through the different shows, and these guys are consistent with the Discovery appearance, with one exception. One of the other Andorians in the scene has a hairstyle very much like the TOS Andorians, and another one has a hairstyle very much like the TNG. Only time we saw an Andorian in TNG. So they've got some variety there in what they're looking like, but they primarily stuck to the appearance of Discovery's Andorians.
I saw that. I like it.
Did Discovery's Andorians have the eye ridges?
Yes.
Okay, because that's new to me.
It's a distinctive-y bit.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a little bit of revision, but maybe it's 1,000 years later. But also they were in Discovery season 2 or 1, so
Andorians have ridges. So I'm not watching this show. This is not my Star Trek.
But yeah. So the other neat thing.
Well, everybody, we have an opening since Jay's quitting.
So the other neat thing in this scene is that we do see some portable transporters. We see more Andorians. We see Orions. We see humans. I think we see a Ferengi in the background at one point.
Do you remember the first time we saw a portable transporter?
Yes, in Nemesis.
Nemesis?
Right. Yeah.
Yep, Star Trek Nemesis. Data had it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have a happy scene of like, okay, well, thank you for getting me here. There's the comms array. Just go over there. Here, have the tricorder. And Michael trusts him, says a heartfelt like, thank you, and takes a step forward towards the comm relay system. And suddenly red sirens blare and like a red string wire kind of wraps itself around her. And Book robs her blind, takes all the stuff she had, and one of those drones just kind of flies up alongside Burnham and just like glares at her. And he tells her, you're in a stasis beam. You're stuck.
You're under arrest.
Yeah, she tried to get towards a bank vault.
Yes, it was.
Book gives her kind of a heartfelt I'm sorry there. But it does feel like I, as an audience member, I'm getting the definite impression that it has become a dog-eat-dog world as this power vacuum is filled with new interests.
Yeah.
Right. It is.
What was it that they were talking about? I guess maybe they were talking about it later, but they were talking about how, like, with the Federation gone, there's no one to enforce endangered species mandates.
Yeah,
Which
that comes up later.
Which
did
comes
hear
into
that.
play because this cargo is temp sensitive, apparently.
Oh yeah, that's a fair point. That's something that they noticed as they were leaving the ship. She noticed that when he was locking it as they were leaving, and it recloaks or goes invisible. Yeah, she mentions that. Oh, it's a temperature sensitive cargo. So that was a thing that came up for sure.
And she deduces that he stole it.
Mhm.
Yep.
Because she's Michael Burnham and she's smart.
Mhm.
So we have our next scene, which is the interrogation scene, where we have an Andorian and an Orion, whose names are Ithic and Ithor, both up against Michael, and she's just not playing along. She's not answering their questions. So they do what the CIA has always done. They dose her with LSD.
Man,
They spray her.
this subverted my expectations here, because when we saw the trailers and we were very much like, wow, Michael's really letting loose and being much less composed than a normal based on, her Vulcan upbringing. And so all the scenes we get, or so many of the scenes we get from Michael, are very exuberant, ecstatic in the preview, and now you know why.
I love this scene. The dialogue in it felt like Aaron Sorkin writing it. Was really sharp and really fast. There's a line where she goes, she realized she's being told that, yeah, this gas makes people tell the truth. And she goes, I have a friend with red hair. You cannot give any to her. Tilly.
Tilly, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. No, her mind is just totally off the rails and she's saying whatever.
She is going fast too. So
She is.
another good bit of dialogue was the Orion and the Andorian asking her, where did you get this vintage stuff? And her response is, vintage is a matter of perspective, isn't it? Because to her, this is everyday stuff. She's right. She's answering their questions truthfully, but while providing them no additional context or information. And then she goes off to say, because you are Aqua and you are Forest Green. And they both look at each other like they're annoyed by, why is this the reaction she's having? They bicker about how, like, did you give her the right dosage? Did you change the dosage? And then we get this like weird, I am reflexively supportive moment of Burnham admitting that she just backs people up and she trusts people and is supportive, which is great.
It's a good moment of growth for her to recognize that. It was also a really nice moment of comedy in an otherwise dreary, atmosphere.
Yeah.
This whole episode has been, Burnham just lost everybody, and now we learn the Federation is gone, and now we learn that space is crap, and now we learn that everything is just vagabonds on the edge. And now she's arrested, and it's just lose after lose after lose. And it was nice to see that, like, these guards were very much, your bungling guards from the Pirates of the Caribbean, just in different form.
They had some character to them.
Yeah.
The bickering I liked, and this they weren't faceless, no name guards that get taken out with a Kirk chop to the back of the head. It felt like the kind of moment that you could realistically see happening. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go finish.
Yeah, I was just about to say then Book, he gets caught.
Oh, well, before we move on, though, I did want to
Okay.
point out that the Orion Ithor is a big guy. Like, he is big and strong looking, and he fits the Enterprise description and what we've seen of Orion males, which is good. Good consistency there. And there was one last really funny line from Michael I wanted to go with, which was when she asks them, can you sit? It's a super cool story I want to tell you. It's a completely devastating way, but it's a good story. And it's like, she just wants to talk.
She's laughing the whole time.
Bordering between laughing and crying, I'd say.
Right, and sleeping.
Yeah. So then we jump to Book, whom she does eventually give them his name. So Book is talking to Hadley, this incredibly tall, impressive-looking Orion woman. I think she's Orion. She was greenish.
I think so too.
Orion, yeah.
Yeah, but she's bigger than any other female Orion we've ever seen. But yeah, and
That's
they're
okay.
they're trying to negotiate pricing on things, and she's like, you know what? Forget it, not doing this, and just kind of like walks off, goes back towards the dilithium vault with what she had, and then we see Cosmo come back around and put a gun up against Book's back. And then
I'm
a couple
sure
seconds,
in the future you still have death by snoo snoo.
I'm sure you could with an Orion.
That size, yeah. Okay, sorry. Just had to say it.
No. And then we get the rest of the crew showing up. We've got a whole bunch of Andorian guards, Ithic and Ithor, and they all surround Book, and Michael comes up and just slugs him.
Yeah.
Wasn't that like the fourth time she's hit him? Maybe third or fourth. Yeah. You would think that after the second or third one, he would see it coming, but she's caught him every time.
Yeah.
Yep.
This exchange about this guy wanting to shoot somebody, another well-placed comedic moment.
Yep. And then he gets vaporized.
Not in this scene, but
Right.
Yeah, he ends up losing it because it's like, why would we want to hire somebody whose cargo can be stolen so easily? Zap.
Well, Michael demonstrates here that she is still very high in this scene, right? She goes with, you guys have a real problem if your couriers are stealing stuff and then colliding with 1,000-year-old women in space. And so that's still something that goes on. She's also asked what was the cargo, and she guesses that it was temperature sensitive, very valuable, so it's probably ice cream.
Yes. Back when she was in the hold.
Right. Yeah. So she's definitely still quite high at this point for all this.
And then they get surrounded, tensions raise. She and Book share a wink.
They insult Grudge, and that certainly seems to set off Book.
They insult Grudge?
They said they were going to cook it and eat it.
I thought they were talking about the thing in the hold, not Grudge.
I think they were talking about Grudge.
Murder everybody. Do you hear me?
Because Book then goes with Grudge. She's a queen. So
I thought that's what I caught. Also, was they were talking about the cargo. Maybe I missed that.
I don't think they know what the cargo is.
They said the cargo would feed an entire planet.
Right. Yes.
And then they said that she's a queen. And when they drop her off later in the series, he talks about how it's really good that breeding season just began. They got here just in time.
Okay. Yep. Right.
So I took the impression that the transworm was a queen of the specimen. And because she could feed so many was because she would just be popping out babies that they would then serve up on a
Yes.
See, I thought they didn't know what the transworm was. So they were still trying to figure that out, which is why they were talking about Grudge when that came up. Because Grudge is a large cat. That's the joke. She's big enough to feed a planet. She's a queen. Show her some respect, kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying because the cat's big, fat, But I think both of you guys make a good case for either one. All right.
So then we get a shootout. As soon as the wink goes on, as Dag mentioned, between Michael and Book, they start shooting back at the guards. We get this really weird scene where this like a lamppost or like a tree kind of thing that's in the hallway gets shot, and it erupts in liquid programmable matter again, and it starts piling up around it. Very weird stuff is going around on this planet. Not clear what it is, but the fight choreography here is the best we've seen in probably anything in Star Trek, with the exception of some of the scenes in Picard.
What's really cool is this concept of programmable matter. If you think about a programmable matter in a really highly evolved society where there are computers that can control and reprogram this matter, but then that society falls away and the matter just sort of has some forms, it would totally be super easy for those societies to think of that as magic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's no way that they could conceive of programmable matter when they're trying to eat.
Well, that's what differentiates this from something like Firefly, right? Firefly is a good situation where you've got people on the fringes living in squalor, but they somehow have access to ships that can travel across planets, right?
True.
That's not super consistent. That doesn't make a ton of verisimilitude sense to me, right? I loved Firefly, but here you've got much more advanced things like the programmable matter, the holograms, all this sort of stuff everywhere, and everybody still has access to it. So it's just become commonplace.
For now. I'd say it's commonplace here because of the survivor's bias, perhaps.
Oh, that's
everybody
fair.
We see has it because everybody who doesn't have it isn't here.
So we get a nice back and forth shootout. Book ends up grabbing this thing that looks like the matrix of leadership from the Transformers movies.
I was about to say that.
Yeah?
I was about to say.
Pulls it apart and he lets out this energy burst that knocks everybody back, and Michael's loving it because she's still high as fuck. And they run into the vault, grab all the dilithium that they had there, shove it into their bags, and they then use that same shockwave device on them. And they beam out.
Yeah, they had that little standoff moment in that vault where, he's like, "Give me the crystals," and she's like, "No," and then they get that thing used against them. And before, so they end up with these beautiful falls again. Another really pretty establishing shot.
In a instant transporter chase. They're going all over on the planet, beaming in, beaming out.
We might as well be thinking with portals here.
Right.
Oh yeah, and we get that great line from Michael calling back to the interrogation scene where she goes, "I am done being reflexively supportive," and she punches him again, which is great.
That's two. So yeah, they get followed.
So the VFX that their guns use when they disintegrate someone, and we see a good bit of it because both Michael and Book get some kills on this, is really weird. It's almost like they're being blasted apart, closer to like it's not like the disruptors that we've seen in the past. It's not like the phasers that we saw even in Discovery. It's something new. So it's neat. And one thing that I don't know if it was just maybe me, but the makeup of the guards that kept coming back looked very familiar. Oh, there's a Lurian again. Oh, there's another Lurian again. Oh, it's another. Are they actually getting disintegrated, or are they getting like thrown back somewhere? Like there's not enough knowledge about what's going on here.
I was thinking that these are commonplace thugs, and they're beaming in more and more and more because this quarry is super expensive and lucrative, and these guards' lives are worth it.
No, that's fair.
But I wanted to point out that the Lurians are like the only vintage or legacy alien that doesn't get the Discovery Klingon treatment. They look like Lurians.
Wasn't there a Cardassian too that looked just like a Cardassian?
In this?
Not in the chase.
I think in the trailer maybe, but I didn't see one in Discovery.
Right. Well, no, it was in the trailer. I remember seeing a Cardassian during this scene, but this scene as it aired, I like what happened to him. I don't know, but he's gone. But yes, you're right. The Lurian. Well, the only other Lurian we ever saw was Morn. So it's like there's nothing to change.
And like Morn, this guy doesn't get any lines.
Right.
Well, and then this shootout is very much Imperial stormtroopers that there's 6 of them. They can't hit 2 moving targets. It was literally like something out of Star Wars.
Maybe it was shoot to threaten and not shoot to kill.
Perhaps. I'm not sure I'm going to give them that credit.
Very soon there's going to be another standoff where they don't just immediately shoot them.
Okay.
They need the code to what's his name ship to get the cargo.
Okay. Right.
So they're definitely chasing. They get stuck behind some rocks, and they start realize. And Michael asks them to get beamed out again, and Book goes, "Well, it takes a bit to recharge. Give me some time." And they still pinned. They just buy some time, and they do one last quick transport. And this last transport, Book warns Michael, "You're not going to like this," and he teleports them underwater, like into liquid, which I don't know how that works from a physics perspective. Probably interesting.
I thought about this while the episode was on this morning, and I was thinking like, you don't just anytime anybody beams down, they don't just materialize in the same space as some kind of gas. Like even in what appears to be an open area, there's still something in that volume. Yeah. So the transporter has to send some kind of like burst, like a pressure ahead of the incoming payload, in order to make sure that the payload doesn't merge with whatever happens to be in that space at that time. Unfortunately, transporting into solid objects, that pressure point isn't enough to push away rock, but it's enough to push away air and other gases, and clearly very enough pressure to push away a volume of water by the 31st century. We've never seen this before.
Right, which is still terrifying to me, though. Beaming into something that like occupies and has a ton of mass. Water is not light. So, anyways,
no, it isn't, and that's like a ton of water rushing over you. I think it's 1 ton per cubic meter of water. Yeah.
So they rematerialize there. Book goes, their tracking doesn't work in water or solid materials, so that's why they did this. I think he gets punched again here. I wasn't actually counting the punches as I went through it during my rewatch, but next time I watch it, I probably will.
That makes sense that transporters can't be detected underwater because the signatures that they leave are mildly radioactive, and water's a great insulator for radiation.
Yep, absolutely. So we get another
That's
scene.
good to know.
Yeah, we get a great scene where we can compare Book's abs to Ransom's abs from Lower Decks, and we can see who's got the better pair. They're both pretty good. He offers to help Michael with an injury, a wound that she's got in her shoulder, and he does this very curious scene. So I'm likening it to either being like a druid in like some sort of fantasy setting, or to being like an ecomancer from Pirates of Dark Water, where some lights show up on his face and he chants something in a language we do not recognize, and a plant grows for him out of the water.
Mhm.
I was thinking of that first or second episode of the classic Doctor Who, not classic, but the one with Christopher Eccleston, where he takes Rose to the end of the sun. And there are human hybrids with like plants and elements there. And I was thinking maybe some genetic augmentation has now been authorized for humans, and whatever is in him, whether it's nanotech or some kind of biological resonance with nature, allows him to summon sustenance at will.
Okay, that works as well enough as anything else. So he squeezes out some goo out of it, sticks it on her wound, and then he uses a handkerchief to tie it on. And
Space aloe.
Yeah, because the man's got to blow his nose.
which I thought was a really clever line too. But Michael does ask him about whether he was praying, and he's very non-responsive and goes something like. So
could be like communing with the spirit of the planet in some way.
So he then offers Michael his handheld, portable, long-range subspace transceiver, which is the size of like your thumb, and it's got the capabilities of like the ones on the Enterprise, apparently. Mm-hmm. And she tries to call out. He warns her to be quick because Cosmo will track it, or the baddies will track it, and she uses it. She gets no response. They pack it up. She hands it back, and they go back towards the ship. The neat bit, though, while they start walking, though, is he finally realizes that, like, so you're a time traveler. And he states very clearly that all time travel technology was destroyed after the temporal wars.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And he makes it clear that it was outlawed, so no one has it anymore.
Right. So this just reinforces her solitude. There's no way back. I did like that Enterprise reference was there. I'm hoping the temporal wars are a reference to like temporal Cold War stuff. And maybe the temporal Cold War is just what they called it in timelines where
it didn't go hot.
Sort of like a prime directive thing. We don't, in this timeline, they don't know about the temporal wars, so we don't talk about them openly. It's a Cold War. We don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. That was really good.
I did like that very, very ominous thing there, that there was temporal wars, time travel, all technologies destroyed. It's outlawed, banned. So there's no going back, no going forward. At least, apparently based on that.
Unless you can, well, I guess you can't warp around the sun without dilithium.
Right.
So they make it back to their ship, and they're right by it. And that's when the baddies all teleport right in, and they are surrounded again with everybody armed. Michael and Book toss down their weapons because they realize this is not a good place for them to fight. Ithor demonstrates that he knows exactly where Book's ship is by pointing up at it and shooting at it, lighting it up.
That was a really cool moment from an artistic perspective. In the sequence that we have shown here, the field is disrupting around the ship, but there's two elements that I really like. One is the reflection in the water as the ripple of the ship is reflected in the water, but also that the ripple itself disrupts sunlight, and there's a clear shadow falling upon the shore there. So just a technical achievement that I thought was really cool.
Yeah, it's beautifully shot, so... Anyways, they're surrounded again by the Lurian, a Tellarite, which I noticed in the background. A guy that, there's a guy that has this weird, like, StarCraft Hydralisk-looking face, some alien that I don't recognize. And they start getting demanded, what's the password to the ship? How do they get the cargo out? And he gives the password, which is sticky.
I wanted it to be Bosco.
And that's like right after they disrupt Cosmo.
Right.
Bye, Cosmo.
There was some good like password shaming, right? Because Sticky's kind of a crappy password.
One thing I did notice about this sequence, this is the second sequence filmed in this particular location, but it felt like at the beginning when it was just Michael and Book that they were on site, whereas here it feels like they were in front of a green screen. That's just how I felt about it. There was something about the way they moved in relation to the background and how blurry the background was that just didn't seem right to my eye.
Well, in the previous scenes, they didn't have the holographic interface in front of them, so maybe they had to do it this way so that they could add in the holographic interface in front of the characters.
I guess that would make sense.
So they give him the password, he types it in after some password shaming, and the part of the ship decloaks and like a section of it lowers down separate from the rest of it, and a thing is now in a tube, and it's kind of like just chilling there. Michael is whispered to by Book to close her eyes, and they start like trying to get the attention of the thing in the tube. They shoot at the tube, and out comes a large caterpillar looking thing, kind of like a slug, but it's glowing in blue, and everybody's eyes that are looking at it also start to glow blue, and they kind of like rock back and forth for a second while it's trancing them, considering it's a transform. And down it hops and eats Ithor in one bite, and we see a spray of green blood.
Poor Ithor. I'm pretty sure this thing came from Pandora.
It looks like it.
If you're an Avatar fan, just all the glowiness is just, oh yeah, thanks James Cameron for ruined glowiness for everything.
This is probably one of those moments I should have the subtitles on. Is it a trans worm or a trans worm?
Trances in trans.
Okay, I thought I heard trans worm, like somehow it was involved in being able to help a ship go
like
transwarp. Right.
I can hear you there. I had turned on subtitles by this time.
Gotcha.
So then it eats Ithic, and then we see a good spray of blue blood as well. So good. It's equally consuming Orions and Andorians. I am curious about the trans effect that it has on people. Is it telepathic or empathic or something? Is there something to that? Because it was very effective against a wide variety of alien races.
Right. I would have to say that it's probably I don't know.
That's the part that I missed going through it the first time, was like, why did he tell her to close his eyes if suddenly her eyes are going to be open right away again 3 seconds later? Like, if it was me, I'd have just been standing there until somebody says open your eyes again. But
So one thing to note, though, is the password that he entered in, that sticky password, wasn't just decloak the ship. It was decloak the ship, lower the section, and unleash Molly, which is what we learn is the name of the transform. And that's different,
Molly.
right?
Really? Molly is the third Molly in Star Trek. Can you name the other two?
O'Brien?
Right. Molly.
Molly O'Brien.
Brian's daughter. And there's another?
Yeah. Janeway's dog was named Molly.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yep.
That's why I'm the trivia master.
So that was a good one. Now I still think it's very clever of Book to have a password or like a trigger word that does these things. It unleashes something particularly dangerous. It opens its portal access, everything from one password, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Neat thing. And then it decides to just swallow Michael whole. Didn't stop the chew. No blood spray, but down she goes. And Book does the glowy forehead thing again, speaks in the language that we don't understand, like talks to it. It starts to calm down, and then it like expectorates Michael with a great distance. Like she goes flying a good 15, 20 feet.
I'm surprised she's not covered in like residual blue and green here, though.
Ooh. I thought of Lower Decks season 1 when Boimler would get sucked on by the spider.
Is it a transworm that's like sucking on the nacelle of Cerritos in the opening credits? Giant transform. That's how big they get.
Wow, it looks similar.
Maybe that's why they can be used as warp nacelles.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Jay's not wrong about that transworm.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up then after the thing starts to be very friendly to Book. It looks kind of cute now when it's not chowing down on Orions and Andorians, though it's still got some blue splattered around its face and some green splattered around its eyes. So it's got some gore to it. And then they go inside.
Just save it for later.
So we have a scene of what looks like quantum slipstream drive. It's not confirmed, but it does look like it.
It is a cool like variation of the quantum slipstream drive that we saw in Voyager, whereas like maybe it's a more refined or a perfected version of QSD. And honestly, it's been 1,000 years. Like, why would it be the same? Why would it look the same?
Yeah, they've had 1,000 years of development, so they're on their way towards something. We don't really get details on what it is quite yet. They mentioned the Endangered Species Act. This is where it comes up. There's no one to enforce it except for Book and Grudge that are out there protecting these species and saving them. And Book had mentions that he comes from a family, like a long line of poachers and killers. And every now and then in the genes, there's one that just can't do it, and that's why he's estranged from his family. He's really out on his own. Grudge is his only companion. And we finally get his full name. Cleveland Book is finally confirmed here. So he's named after a city in Ohio. Great. And here's also where we learn the name of his ship. So he radios in somewhere and he provides an access code, and it's a Mandelbrot code set Nautilus. So Mandelbrot codes are mathematical equation sets that have like a large number of numbers. They're used for passwords, really. They're used for passwords and for encryption. They're huge. And
if he goes Mandelbrot code set Nautilus, and Nautili are, they're very representative of that golden number, the golden ratio. So that would be a cool fractal encryption to have.
Yep. So he sends that in, and that's where it becomes clear that he's going to a planet called Sanctuary 4, or a destination called Sanctuary 4, and he's taking the the transform there. So they arrive. We see another beautiful establishing shot with the worms like jumping around and playing in the water and having a blast. And we hear much more of the Druid language, chanting led by Book, but he's not the only one doing it. It's very neat. The breeding cycle is described. And he finally asks Michael, how far did you jump in time? 930 years, he tells her, or she tells him.
I think he asks her, what did you lose?
Oh, yeah.
And she said 930 years. I just thought it was a little more poetic that way.
Yes.
That's fair. It certainly is. And her rationale for doing so is to ensure the future, which I think gets across the fact that she had no choice. That her jumping forward is the only reason there's still life. So,
these trees look very familiar. They look a little bit like the trees that Kirk and McCoy ran through at the beginning of Into Darkness on that planet Nibiru.
They do.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just a little bit, not exactly, but a little bit.
Yep. And so at the end of that scene, they go back to space, and Book is taking her to a site that he describes as being an old Federation relay station. She asks what happened to it. A main reactor breach. The damage is very serious. The thing looks quite wrecked. There's a big cloud of ship debris all over. It is not a small bit of damage. And they finally get inside, and we are reunited with the character from the cold open from the very beginning of the episode, whom we now learn his name, and it's Aditya Sahil. And he is welcome to Starfleet. He is gracious, he is welcoming, and he listens to Burnham give her, I'm Commander Michael Burnham, this is my serial number, I'm here, I'm from the past, right? And we get this beautiful, I've been waiting to help someone in this, it's going to be you. And he asks that she help him with a favor, or rather they scan first. They do a scan across 600 light years.
600 light years?
Yeah, 600 light years, and that's all that he could see. It was 30 sectors worth. That's as far as they go. The long-range sensors failed decades ago, but their short and medium cannot go beyond the 30 sectors. Right. So that's still a lot of space.
his father and his grandfather were both commissioned Starfleet officers.
Yeah, that's the little secret that he tells her, that I'm not a actual commissioned officer.
Right.
Mhm.
So he asks the favor that, can you please put this up? And he rematerializes the same way the archives do, that little box with inside of it the flag, kind of like the one that's behind me.
Yep.
And it's this.
And she gives him a commission.
She commissions him.
As the highest ranking Starfleet, as the highest ranking commissioned Starfleet officer on the station. She must have the, from her time even, she probably acknowledges she has the power to give other help commissioned ranks.
Yeah, a battlefield commission is a thing.
Yeah.
And he's commissioned as the acting chief communications officer, which just sounds serious.
But his response when she does that is solemn. It's so great to see like how overjoyed he is in that moment to be recognized as an official officer, and also the solemn duty that he has to keep doing what he has done.
Yeah, and the actor is named Adil Hussein, and he did an amazing job of coming across as like overjoyed, solemn, and serious about this whole interaction. Like, it's the kind of thing that he's been waiting his entire life for. He's manned this station for 40 years, most of it alone, and he's here for her.
Oh yeah.
So he specifically says, I don't know how much of the Federation still exists. I simply do my part to keep it alive. And there's an interesting thing that happens again in Andromeda, another reference that goes on. In the second or third episode of the show, the captain of the Andromeda Ascendant finds an old High Guard, which is the name of their military, their Starfleet equivalent, space station. And inside they find it populated by children, just children. And they're generations removed from the people who originally manned it hundreds of years before they fell.
Mhm.
And they try and uphold all of the same rules, but they're kids, and the radiation on the station kills them when they reach a certain age. So
Ooh.
no one's older than like 16, and when you hit like 17 you start to die essentially.
Have you seen Mary?
Yeah,
Right.
it's super
Miri
similar
from
concepts.
TOS.
There's a Stargate SG-1 episode that does it as well, right? Like, it's a sci-fi trope. But what's really neat here, though, is that they've passed along these traditions of the High Guard from generation to generation, very similar to how Aditya Sahil learned it from his father, who learned it from his father before him.
Yeah.
So that's a theme here that I think is very important in sci-fi. Like, the things that matter get passed down inside of the family.
Well, and Aditya would be, from Michael's point of view, Aditya would be a treasure trove of knowledge. What do you remember of Starfleet when you were growing up as a kid? You said your grandfather was in Starfleet. Do you remember his rank, his position? Were there ships? How many other officers may have you encountered then? If we're thinking Aditya is, 50, maybe 55, maybe 60, maybe even a bit older, just because Federation health standards for humans has enabled them to live to be 140. He could be, in his 70s and just look great. Just anything that she could get from him about how over the course of his lifetime, he has seen this, the fading away of Starfleet.
Oh, I'm sure that there are going to be some great deep discussions that happen about that in the in-between episodes kind of time, right? They're just not going to emphasize that during the episode probably. So they end up hanging up the Starfleet pennant or the flag, and it's a little different than the Federation flag that we've seen in the past. It's got fewer stars. It's a bit more austere. There's no the symbology around it is just a little modified, but it is still identifiable as the UFP flag for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And
so the 6 stars, that's still for the 6 original founding members of the Federation.
We don't know.
I'd like to think.
I was thinking it was either that or maybe the 6 that are still in it.
The 6 that were still in it at the time that the flag was made. The fact that maybe these were the 6 strongest communities of Starfleet at the time, who were able to best survive the post-burn.
Yeah, so the number of original founders for the Federation is also something that gets disagreement on in beta canon and primary canon. So from Enterprise, we know that it's at least 4: United Earth, Vulcan, Andor, and Tellar, right? But in the motion picture time, it was implied that there was a 5th one, which is Alpha Centauri. And then from books throughout, Alpha Centauri has been a consistent one, and it has its own race called Centaurans. But that's not something that's been super consistent. I don't ever remember seeing like a 6th race, though, considered as part of the original founders.
No.
But I wouldn't rule it out, right? Like they might be adding that to the canon now. And that doesn't seem completely inconsistent with things. There could just have been more.
In Worlds of the Federation, the Capellans are listed as the 6th species.
Capellans, interesting.
It's an old book, beta knowledge, but yeah, you had humans, Vulcans, Andorians, Tellarites, Centaurans, and Capellans. Yeah.
Cool.
But we also know that more than 6 people attended the founding of the Federation.
True. And there was a Denobian representative there too, even though we don't actually have confirmation that the Denobians ever joined.
Right. I took it as the actual like founding member signatories, and that was Earth, Vulcan, Andorians, and Tellarites. That's the official canon for, and I know you mentioned a 5th and motion picture, which I've seen that 100 times, never really caught that, but the motion picture really is, nothing has ever been referenced off of that besides Tuvok mentioning Kolinar in Voyager. The motion picture is pretty much like its own, it's just over here. So I'm inclined to think that we're supposed to be going with, there were 4 founding members of the Federation. So this 6, to me, it's probably this is what's left. This is what's left of the Federation is these 6 members. We don't know who they are, but it's just 6.
And then we have the last dialogue of the episode, which is a back and forth between Sahil and Michael, where Sahil goes, "Hope is a powerful thing." And Michael responds with, "Sometimes it's the only thing." Sahil goes, "Our numbers are few, our spirit is undiminished." And Michael responds with, "If there are others out there, we'll find them. We will." Like very resolute, very determined. And the episode closes out there.
Yep. Great first episode. I liked it, was happy with it. We got a couple things that were dropped that I'm really interested in learning more about, which is the burn. What the hell was the deal with dilithium? Also just the collapse of the Federation. Really would like to know some more about that. Who's left? Who's left in it? That seems to be shown by these 6 stars. So they gave us some things to look forward to. There are definitely some mysteries to be solved. And the other thing was in regards to finding Discovery, because the guy mentioned, according to the laws of temporal mechanics, because Discovery was behind her, they could appear anywhere from tomorrow to 1,000 years from now.
And I have a little diagram I'd like to share about how I think that kind of works. And the first time we saw this type of time travel where 2 people enter the same instance and emerge at different times was in Star Trek 2009, when Nero shows up in the 2250s and then, or 2230s. And it's not until like 22 years later or something that Spock shows up in the jellyfish. Even though they left at the same moment in their time, they emerged at 2 different points in the past. And the little diagram I have, oh gosh, I hope this is readable, is that you can have ships descending into the same instance, but depending on their angle of entry or even the time of entry, if somebody goes in first, they could arrive further in one area of that timeline as somebody going in second.
Right.
It's kind of like that Barzan wormhole idea where one terminus is in the Delta Quadrant, one is in the Gamma Quadrant, and depending on what point you enter determines where you end up.
It's just very variable, right? Like we don't know how it's going to go. We suspect because it's still called Star Trek Discovery that they will inevitably somehow get reunited, and the previews have all suggested it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're left in the lurch, wondering about what's Discovery up to now. We didn't see a single scene of anybody else besides Michael in this episode. It's the first episode of Discovery we didn't see Saru, so we are very much left wondering for mystery's sake.
Jay, did you have something to say there?
I was just going to say, I like that diagram, and that's a very good point. And also, even if the two objects are directly behind each other, which in Star Trek 2009, Nero's ship and Spock's ship were more or less like in the same line. Nero's ship goes in first. He arrives in 2233 when Kirk was born. It was 25 years later that Spock showed up. So whatever that lag and difference of when they went through that anomaly, it was good for a 25-year split between the two showing up.
Keep in mind, they didn't actually show this, but that was also the sort of same thing that would have happened in the Guardian of Forever. If I jump in, then you jump in, and the scene has shifted. We're in two different spots.
Right. Oh yeah, completely. And you're not talking. It could be where you jumped in was during the Cold War.
On Earth.
Right, on Earth. I was slow. I tripped or slipped, and by the time I jumped in, I ended up in Spartan times or something, because Guardian of Forever, it was just randomly going around. I mean, there was a pattern, but it wasn't a linear pattern.
Time dilation might play into effect too, right? Like we've seen from movies like Interstellar, where a minute from one perspective can be months, years in another perspective. While you're traveling through that temporal wormhole, right? You may only think a couple seconds have passed, and on the other side, it's been 6 years.
Right. Yeah, because in good point, in Interstellar, they got stuck on that planet for about 30, 40 minutes that they weren't planning on, and by the time they got up to the station, that poor guy had been there by himself for how long?
Like a decade, it seemed.
Something like that.
I think it had been like 27 years, and he had put himself in for stints of cryo sleep, like up to 5 years at a time. But I wanted to bring up the Guardian of Forever because it still exists, hopefully. And they did say that all forms of time travel were banned and outlawed. So it would be interesting if the conclusion of season 3 was, and I have a longer thought about this, but the conclusion of season 3 is we made it here, we protected control, we're on our way to rebuilding the Federation. Who wants to go home? And there's nobody enforcing the quarantine of the Guardian of the Forever world. So they could go there and send their people back to the 22nd century, so that maybe they can show up in strange new worlds while they take on a whole new crew of new people in the season 4. And I think season 4 is really going to be the first season. You know, the first 2 seasons were how did they get to the future? The second season, or the third season, is how do they get back together? And the 4th season will be, we are a united Starship Discovery in the future. These are our missions.
It would kind of cheapen the denouement moment from end of season 2, where we see Spock like under trial or being interrogated or whatever. All that, it would kind of cheapen it if they do somehow make it back. I'm not saying they shouldn't make it back, but I thought that scene was very powerful, and it would kind of be unfortunate if they cheapened it out that way.
They can't come back. They can't come back because the end of season 2 really closed that loop in regards to the fan complaints as to why Spock never mentioned having a sister throughout any other iteration of Trek, and it was because any mention of any of the crew or Discovery was punishable by treason.
Oh boy!
That was what. Remember when Spock suggested that to the Admiral during the what's the word I'm looking for? The debriefing at near the end of that episode. Spock suggested that, said any mention of Discovery or the crew punishable by treason, and that was their their write-up for
really hard line there, though.
Well, but that's how they appease the fans. Is to, okay, well, you're wondering why Spock didn't say anything about having a sister in Star Trek 5.
He never said anything about his brother
which was
either.
20 years ago. You know,
Right.
it's because it was a pretty high up Starfleet law not to. It was a cover-up. It was a cover-up.
Yeah.
So them coming back would completely defeat that they were able to.
I don't
look at
think
logically.
I don't think everyone's going to come back. I think some people, like just saying speculation. We can come back to this in our post
Okay.
series thing, but speculation is that whoever wants to go home can, and that's just something the 2260s didn't really anticipate. They're in the future. We're going to try this. It's going to be over and done with, and then boom, what do we do with these 50 people that came back? Section 31 grabs them, turns them into faceless, nameless agents, and that's it? Or are they executed for treason because they themselves are references to that which is now illegal?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so there's definitely some things that I think are very weird about that policy, right? Like, I don't think that Spock never mentioning Michael is strange at all, because he never mentioned the Cybok. He didn't mention his dad, Sarek, until he was literally on the ship.
Right.
Right?
And you would think that Kirk would know the personnel file of his first officer, and it would clearly call out Sarek and Amanda and all that. But anyway.
What I find stranger, though, is the idea that, like, Tilly's mother wouldn't talk about her kid. Right? Like, what do you do? Show up with like Men in Black and like mind wipe her or something? Because that lady was a helicopter parent from hell. So if her kid goes missing, she's gonna call the Federation. She's gonna call the council. She's gonna be calling Admiralty at their homes. She's gonna make a ruckus. There's no way to enforce that kind of thing unless you're gonna literally disappear parents. Because it doesn't seem very realistic. So we'll see how they handle it, if they handle it at all.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yep.
It's a very interesting thing now. You totally can call it a trope that any family Spock has gets forced on him as a surprise. His dad, his brother, and now his sister.
Yeah, the only one that he seemed to be very close to, like, was his mom, Amanda, right? Like, that was like the only healthy familial relation he seemed to have growing up.
And then everyone else could just go to hell.
Well, trying to deal with those emotions is rough.
I mean, Spock was like one of like 7 kids, right? We've only learned a couple of them. Give them a couple more new TV shows and we'll learn about all his other siblings. It's fine.
Oh, don't go there. Oh, please do not put that thought out into the universe. Please.
People will be like, that wasn't in yesteryear.
Right, exactly. So on that note, it's a great episode. Looking forward to more.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Michael reuniting with the crew. Saru's still my favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a ride, and I'm happy to be a part of it finally, where I can watch it as it's released.
Good.
This is the only show I watch week to week. Well, Star Trek shows are the only shows that I will watch week to week. Everything else, I'll wait till the season's out. Like The Boys recently ended. Wait until the season was done and marathoned it, right?
Yes.
Star Trek, though, we're here for it.
Yes, we are.
Well, we have to be because we're doing these weekly things. So, yep, you got to stay on it.
Well, I'll be on it as long as you need me to be.
Renzo, thank you. Thank you very much for.
Yeah, no, Renzo and I are talking about doing a midweek show to offset our normal episode reviews. So stay tuned. Audiences, stay tuned for that. You'll be able to hear more at Beyond Trek Podcast on Twitter. You can follow me at Trek Nexus on Twitter. Renzo, where can we find you?
Discord or anywhere else. I'm not super active on the social medias there. They kind of, yeah.
We also have you can Google our Patreon, basically Beyond Trek Podcast and Beyond Trek Productions. Google those. You'll find us on Patreon, Anchor, Facebook,
Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter. The audio version of this podcast is available on everywhere you get podcasts, and you can always watch the video on YouTube. The YouTube video has pluses like imagery that we use from the episodes, and you can see us either rolling our eyes or nodding along heavily in agreement when one of us makes an amazing point. So thank you so much for listening to us.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you for going boldly with Beyond Trek Podcast.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your years. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.